Marcus Thorne stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his Manhattan penthouse, 47 stories above the city that never slept. At 2 in the morning, the streets below still pulsed with yellow cabs and delivery trucks, their headlights tracing paths through concrete canyons like blood cells through arteries. He had just signed a contract worth $500 million. The papers sat on his desk, ink still drying, representing 3 years of negotiations compressed into 18 months of brutal maneuvering. His company, Thorne Tech Solutions, had outbid 2 competitors and secured exclusive rights to provide cloud infrastructure for the entire Department of Defense Communications network. He should have felt something, victory perhaps, satisfaction, even simple relief after the endless conference calls and red-eye flights to Washington. Instead, he felt the same hollow emptiness that had become his constant companion, a void that expanded despite every addition to his net worth. The penthouse stretched across 6,200 square feet of polished concrete and glass. An award-winning architect had designed it in the style of Japanese minimalism: clean lines, muted colors, no clutter, no warmth, no photographs on the sleek floating shelves, no books splayed open on the custom furniture, nothing that suggested a human being actually lived here rather than simply existing between business trips. Marcus loosened his tie and poured 2 fingers of Macallan 25 into a crystal tumbler. The bottle had cost $3,000. He set the glass down on the counter without tasting it. Even expensive whiskey had lost its appeal. Food, drink, the view, everything felt muted, as though someone had turned down the volume on his entire existence. He walked through the vast living space where shadows played across white walls. His footsteps echoed against the polished concrete floors. The central air conditioning hummed its mechanical lullaby, maintaining a perfect 68 degrees regardless of the season outside. Everything in his life was temperature-controlled, light-controlled, noise-controlled. He had removed every variable that might introduce chaos or emotion into his carefully constructed world. At 38 years old, Marcus had everything the world promised success could buy. He had built Thorne Tech from a garage startup into a $12 billion empire in 15 years. He owned properties in 3 countries. His car collection included a vintage Aston Martin and a Tesla Roadster he drove maybe twice a year. He had been featured on the cover of Forbes, profiled in Fortune, interviewed by Bloomberg. Business school professors taught case studies about his aggressive acquisition strategies. He had also been divorced twice. The first marriage to Jessica Caldwell, a model he had met at a charity gala, lasted 18 months before imploding in a very public scandal involving her personal trainer. The second marriage to Vanessa Lynn, a startup CEO with her own ambitions, survived 2 years before they both admitted they were roommates who occasionally had sex, not partners building a life. That divorce had cost him $80 million in settlement. He had written the check without blinking, grateful to be free of the pretense. His father, Richard Thorne, had been a corporate attorney known for his ruthless efficiency in the courtroom. Richard's philosophy was simple: emotion is weakness, reserved for losers. He had drilled that lesson into Marcus from the time he was old enough to understand language. When Marcus came home, crying after being bullied at school, Richard's response was to sign him up for boxing lessons with the instruction to never show weakness again. When Marcus's mother died of ovarian cancer when he was 16, Richard had given him exactly 1 day off from boarding school before expecting him back in class. His mother, Diane, had been a concert pianist with delicate hands and a soft laugh. She used to play Chopin nocturnes in the evening, filling their Connecticut house with music that made Marcus feel safe. When the cancer diagnosis came, Marcus had been away at Phillips Exeter Academy, focused on maintaining his 4.0 GPA and captaining the debate team. The school called him on a Thursday afternoon. His mother had maybe 2 days, the headmaster said gently. 3 at most. Marcus packed a bag and caught the train south. There was an accident on the tracks, a freight derailment. The train sat motionless for 6 hours while crews cleared the wreckage. By the time Marcus reached the hospital, his mother had been dead for 40 minutes. She had asked for him in those final hours, the nurse told him. She had wanted to say goodbye. Marcus never forgave himself for prioritizing a debate tournament over visiting home the previous weekend. He never forgave the universe for the timing. And he never forgave his father for saying at the funeral, "Your mother was too soft for this world anyway." After Diane's death, Marcus had learned to suffocate every emotion that threatened his focus. Grief became fuel for ambition. Loneliness became motivation to work harder. Love became a transaction to be managed with prenuptial agreements and scheduled date nights that fit between board meetings. He worked 18-hour days, slept 4 to 5 hours, and filled the remaining time with strategic planning. He had exactly 347 contacts in his phone. None were saved with affectionate nicknames. John, CFO, Sarah, attorney, Michael, investor. Everyone categorized by function, by utility, by what they could provide to his empire. He took medication for anxiety attacks but hid the prescription from everyone except his personal physician. Panic attacks were weakness. Needing help was failure. So he swallowed the pills in private and pretended his hands never trembled during board meetings. Now, standing in his temperature-controlled fortress at 2 in the morning, Marcus stared at his reflection in the window. The man looking back at him wore a $3,000 suit and a watch that cost more than most people's cars. That man had everything. That man also looked completely dead inside. He noticed the hallway light was still on near the staff quarters, a section of the apartment he rarely acknowledged. The light seemed unusual. His housekeeper always turned off the lights by 10 o'clock. Always. In 6 months of employment, she had been nothing if not predictable in her invisible efficiency. Marcus frowned. The penthouse had been featured in Architectural Digest 3 weeks ago. Since then, he had received 2 pieces of concerning fan mail and 1 barely veiled threat from an anti-billionaire activist group. Security had assured him the building was impenetrable, but the light bothered him. An electrical issue, perhaps. Or worse, an intruder who had somehow bypassed 47 floors of security. He walked toward the staff wing, his mind already calculating response times for building security, police, his personal protection team. The door to the small bedroom was closed. Light leaked from underneath. Marcus's pulse quickened, not from fear, but from the executive instinct to assess and neutralize threats immediately. He reached for the handle and opened the door without knocking. Time fractured into slow motion. The woman standing in the center of the small room was not an intruder. Elena Reyes, his housekeeper, stood in a white cotton slip, her dark hair wet from a recent shower, water droplets still clinging to her bare shoulders. She had been reaching into the narrow closet for a nightshirt when the door opened. Her face turned toward him, her eyes going wide with shock that transformed instantly into pure, devastating humiliation. The bathroom light behind her created a silhouette that left nothing to imagination. For 4 or 5 seconds, an eternity compressed into heartbeats, neither of them moved. Elena's hands flew to cover herself, clutching the nightshirt against her chest. Her face flushed from her neck to her hairline. Her knees seemed to buckle slightly, as though the weight of shame might drop her to the floor. Marcus stood frozen in the doorway, his mind short-circuited, unable to process what he was seeing, unable to reconcile his intention with this catastrophic violation. His eyes locked on her face, on the expression of absolute horror reflected there. He saw himself through her eyes in that moment, not a concerned employer checking on a potential security issue, but a predator who had invaded the only private space she possessed in his entire massive apartment. Her voice came out as a whisper, broken and small. "I'm sorry, I didn't know you were there. I'm so sorry, Mr. Thorne." The apology made no sense. She had done nothing wrong. She had been in her own room, preparing for bed, entitled to privacy and dignity. Yet instinct, the instinct of someone without power, someone who understood that survival often meant accepting blame, even for violations committed against you, made her apologize. Marcus felt bile rise in his throat. His hands gripped the door frame as he stammered, No, the light was on. I thought, God, I'm so sorry." He yanked the door closed and stood in the hallway, his breathing ragged, his pulse hammering in his ears. His hand remained on the doorknob for 3 full minutes. On the other side of that door, he heard nothing, no crying, no movement, just silence that felt heavier than any sound. Marcus walked back to his bedroom on legs that felt disconnected from his body. He sat on the edge of his $12,000 mattress and put his head in his hands. The image of Elena's face, terrified, humiliated, reduced to nothing, seared itself into his memory with the permanence of a brand. He had seen fear before. He had seen it in the eyes of competitors when he outmaneuvered them, in the faces of employees he fired during quarterly purges, in the expressions of his ex-wives when they realized he would never love them the way they needed. But this was different. This was fear born of absolute powerlessness. Elena was a 24-year-old woman living in a strange city, dependent on him for employment, housing, and income. She had no family nearby, no safety net, no recourse. And he, a billionaire who controlled every aspect of her working life, had just barged into her room while she was undressed. The legal implications hit him like cold water. At 12:15 in the morning, Marcus grabbed his phone and called David Kim, his personal attorney, waking him from sleep. David's voice was alert immediately. "Marcus, what happened?" The words came out flat, factual. "I accidentally walked into my housekeeper's room while she was changing clothes." Silence on the other end. Then, "Were there witnesses? Security footage?" "No, just the two of us." David's next words were measured, careful. "Marcus, you're a billionaire who walked in on a female employee while she was undressed. If she files a harassment complaint, if she goes to the media, you're finished. The optics are catastrophic. You need to settle immediately. Pay her whatever she asks. Get a signed NDA. Do it tomorrow before she has time to contact a lawyer." "She won't sue." "You don't know that, Marcus. Everyone has a price. And right now, her lawyer could argue sexual harassment, hostile work environment, emotional distress. A jury would see a vulnerable young woman and a powerful older man. You'd lose before opening statements finished." "She's not like that." "How do you know? You said yourself you barely know her." David was right. Marcus had employed Elena Reyes for 6 months and knew almost nothing about her beyond the basic information from the employment agency. Age 24, from Georgia, high school education, no criminal record, references from previous domestic positions. She had arrived in New York 6 months ago and moved directly into the staff quarters. In that entire time, they had exchanged perhaps 30 words total. Marcus hung up and lay back on his bed without removing his suit. Sleep was impossible. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Elena's face. Not her body. He had deliberately avoided looking at anything but her eyes once he realized his mistake. But that expression of shame, that instant transformation from private person to humiliated victim, played on an endless loop behind his eyelids. For the first time in 20 years, Marcus felt genuinely guilty about another human being who existed outside the realm of business transactions. The sensation was foreign and uncomfortable, like a muscle he had never used suddenly being forced to bear weight. He had built his empire on the philosophy that guilt was a weakness that slowed decision-making. When he fired employees, he never lingered on their personal circumstances. When he bankrupted competitors, he never considered the ripple effects on their families. Business was war, and war required casualties. But this was not business. This was a young woman who cleaned his apartment, cooked his meals, laundered his clothes, and maintained the infrastructure of his daily life. She existed in his peripheral vision, a ghost who appeared before dawn and vanished by the time he came home. He had never asked her about her life, never inquired about her family or her dreams, never acknowledged that she worked 7 days a week without complaint, that she survived on whatever wages he paid through the agency, that she had sacrificed something to be here in this city that ate people alive. He had made her invisible, and tonight he had violated even that invisible existence. In her small room on the other side of the apartment, Elena Reyes sat on the edge of her narrow bed, staring at the wall. She had not cried. Tears would come later, in the hours before dawn, when exhaustion finally overwhelmed shock. Right now, she felt only numbness in the mechanical thought process of someone calculating survival odds. She would be fired. That certainty sat in her chest like a stone. Rich men did not tolerate witnesses to their mistakes. He would tell the agency she had been inappropriate, that she had somehow engineered the situation, that she was unsuitable for employment. The agency would blacklist her. No one in Manhattan hired domestic staff without impeccable references. She would be on a bus back to Georgia within a week. Elena pulled out her phone and opened her banking app, $1,400 in savings. That was 6 months of careful management, of eating leftover food from Marcus's untouched dinners, of walking instead of taking the subway, of buying nothing that was not absolutely necessary. She sent $2,800 to her grandmother every month, keeping $1,000 for herself. In Manhattan, $1,000 per month meant choosing between phone service and new shoes, between winter coat and doctor visits, between dignity and survival. Her grandmother, Maria Reyes, was 72 years old with severe congestive heart failure. The medication to keep her alive cost $3,200 monthly. Medicare covered $1,100. The remaining $2,100 came from Elena's wire transfers, sent religiously on the first of every month. Without that money, her grandmother would be forced to choose between heart medication and blood pressure pills, between the drugs that kept her alive and the food that sustained her. Elena had left Valdosta, Georgia, 6 months ago with a single suitcase and a heart full of desperate hope. She had been studying nursing at Valdosta State University, maintaining a 3.8 GPA while working 3 jobs to cover tuition and her grandmother's medical expenses. She had been in the top 5% of her class. Professors had told her she had a gift for patient care, that she would make an excellent nurse. Then her grandmother's heart condition worsened. The new medication was experimental, expensive, not fully covered by insurance. Elena had done the math. 3 jobs in Valdosta brought in maybe $3,000 per month. Tuition was $8,000 per semester. Medication was $3,200 monthly. Rent was $600. The numbers did not work. They would never work. The domestic placement agency had contacted her through a posting she had made on a caregiver job board. Live-in housekeeper position in Manhattan. Private client, $3,800 per month plus room and board. Minimal interaction required. Preferred candidate would be discreet, efficient, and comfortable with solitude. Elena had prayed over the decision for 2 days. Leaving nursing school felt like amputating her own future. But her grandmother needed medication more than Elena needed a degree. So she had withdrawn from her classes, sold her nursing textbooks to a used bookstore for a fraction of their worth, said goodbye to the tiny apartment she shared with Maria, and boarded a Greyhound bus north. The first time she saw the penthouse, Elena had felt like she had stepped onto a movie set. 6,000 square feet of luxury that cost more per month than her entire hometown's median annual income. She had her own room, small, yes, but private, with an attached bathroom that was larger than her bedroom back in Georgia. The kitchen contained appliances she had only seen in cooking shows. The refrigerator alone probably cost more than her used Honda Civic. Marcus Thorne himself was exactly what she expected a billionaire to be. Cold, distant, focused entirely on work. In 6 months, he had looked directly at her maybe 5 times. He left notes on the kitchen counter. Terse instructions without please or thank you. Dry cleaning. Tuesday, client dinner. Friday, guest room needed. Grocery list attached. He communicated in bullet points and expected invisible execution. Elena had learned quickly to become a ghost. She woke at 4:45, did 15 minutes of yoga in her small room, said morning prayers for her grandmother's health. By 5:30, she had coffee brewing and breakfast prepared according to his preferences, which never varied. Egg white omelet, whole grain toast, black coffee, protein shake. She cleaned while he was at work, timing her tasks so she finished each room before he might need it. She did laundry on Tuesdays and Fridays. She meal prepped on Sundays, creating portions he could reheat during his late nights at the office. She never used his Wi-Fi, relying on her own limited data plan to call her grandmother or browse the internet. She never took food without permission, eating only the leftovers he abandoned. She never sat on his furniture or touched his belongings beyond necessary cleaning. She existed in his space without claiming any of it as her own. Once, early in her employment, she had been in the living room dusting the minimalist shelves when Marcus came home unexpectedly at noon. She had frozen, cloth in hand, waiting for instructions. He had walked past her without acknowledgement, grabbed his laptop from the desk, and left again. She might have been furniture. She might have been air. Elena told herself this was fine. She did not need warmth or recognition. She needed income. She needed to keep her grandmother alive. Everything else was luxury she could not afford. 2 weeks ago, she had been awake past her usual bedtime, sitting at the kitchen table writing her weekly letter to Maria. She kept her voice low, but the penthouse acoustics were strange. Sound traveled in unexpected ways through the open floor plan. She heard Marcus's voice from his office, sharp and cold, conducting a late-night conference call. His words had drifted to her clearly. I don't care if they have families, Robert. Fire the bottom 15%. We need to trim costs for Q4. Sentiment is irrelevant. Performance metrics are what matter. Execute it by Friday. Elena had sat very still, pen frozen above paper. This was the man who employed her. This was the person who held her grandmother's life in his hands, though he would never know it. She had felt something cold settle in her stomach. Not quite fear, but a deep wariness that came from understanding exactly what kind of person she worked for. Men like Marcus Thorne did not see people. They saw assets, liabilities, numbers on a spreadsheet. If she became inconvenient, she would be eliminated as efficiently as those 15% of employees whose families apparently did not matter. Now, sitting on her bed with her nightshirt clutched against her chest, Elena understood that she had become inconvenient. The only question was how fast the elimination would happen. She opened her laptop, a used Dell she had bought for $200 from a pawn shop in Georgia, and began drafting a resignation letter. Better to quit than be fired. Better to control the narrative than wait for him to write it for her. Dear Mr. Thorne, I regret to inform you of my immediate resignation from the position of household staff. I apologize for any inconvenience this may cause. Please consider this my formal notice. Sincerely, Elena Reyes. She read it 3 times, then closed the laptop without saving. Resignation implied she had done something wrong. It implied guilt, and she had done nothing except exist in her own room at 11:45 at night. But she had also apologized to him. Instinct had made her take the blame, had made her try to smooth over his mistake by shouldering responsibility. That was what people without power did. They apologized for being victimized because sometimes an apology was the only currency they had to buy mercy. Elena pulled out her phone and checked her bank balance again, as though the numbers might have changed in the last 5 minutes. $1,400. If she left New York tomorrow, bus fare to Georgia would be $140. That left her with $1,260. Maybe 6 weeks of medication for Maria if Elena could find work immediately upon returning home. Her phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Patterson, her grandmother's neighbor. Honey, your grandma had a good day today. We played cards and she beat me 3 times. She misses you, but says she's so proud. Sleep well. Elena stared at the message until her vision blurred. Her grandmother was proud. Proud that Elena had made it to the big city. Proud that she was earning good money. Proud that she was building something better than the poverty they had endured together. Maria did not know that her granddaughter spent her days scrubbing toilets for a man who had never once asked her name in conversation. Maria did not know that Elena cried herself to sleep some nights from the sheer loneliness of being invisible. And now Maria would learn that Elena had failed, that she was coming home, that the grand adventure had lasted only 6 months before collapsing under the weight of one terrible moment. Elena set her phone down and finally let herself cry. Not from fear or even humiliation, but from exhaustion. She was 24 years old. She had lost her parents at 16, had raised herself while caring for her grandmother, had sacrificed her education for someone else's medical bills, had moved to a city where she knew no one, and had made no friends because loneliness was cheaper than connection. She was tired of being strong. She was tired of being invisible. She was tired of apologizing for taking up space in a world that kept insisting she was too poor, too uneducated, too unimportant to matter. But crying changed nothing. So after 15 minutes, Elena wiped her face, got into bed, and lay staring at the ceiling. If Marcus fired her tomorrow, she would hold her head high. She would pack her single suitcase. She would return to Georgia and find 3 jobs again. She would survive because survival was what she did best. Sleep did not come. At 4:45, her alarm went off as usual. Elena rose, washed her face, pulled her dark hair into a neat bun, and put on her uniform, simple black dress, white apron. She looked at herself in the mirror. Her eyes were swollen from crying, but otherwise she looked exactly as she did every morning. Professional, forgettable, invisible. She walked to the kitchen and began making coffee, moving through her routine with mechanical precision. The coffee machine hissed and gurgled. Rain tapped against the windows. A storm had moved in overnight. The penthouse felt especially cold this morning, despite the perfect climate control. At 6:55, she heard Marcus's bedroom door open. Her shoulders tightened involuntarily. She kept her back to the kitchen entrance, focusing on the coffee as though it required her complete attention. His footsteps approached, stopped. The silence stretched unbearably. Then his voice, quieter than she had ever heard it. Elena. It was the first time in 6 months he had addressed her by name instead of a general "excuse me" or "thank you," directed at the air around her. She turned slowly, keeping her eyes fixed on the floor. "Yes, Mr. Thorne. I need to speak with you. Please look at me." She forced herself to meet his eyes. He looked terrible. Shadows under his eyes, hair uncombed, still wearing yesterday's suit minus the jacket and tie. His white dress shirt was wrinkled, the top 2 buttons undone. He looked like he had not slept at all. His next words came out carefully, as though he had rehearsed them. "About last night, there is no excuse for what I did, none. I violated your privacy in the worst possible way." Elena's prepared response, "It was an accident, sir," died on her lips. His expression was not what she expected. There was no calculation there, no preemptive legal defense. He looked genuinely horrified. "An accident is spilling coffee," Marcus continued. "What I did was careless and disrespectful. I should have knocked. I should have called out your name. I should have done 10 different things before opening that door. I failed you." The air left Elena's lungs. In her entire life, no person with power over her had ever admitted failure. Teachers blamed students. Bosses blamed employees. The social worker who processed her parents' death had blamed insufficient life insurance rather than acknowledge the inadequate support system for orphaned teenagers. You're apologizing to me?" "Of course I am. Elena, you did nothing wrong. I did. And I need you to know, if you want to file a complaint with the agency, if you want to leave, I will provide 6 months severance and an excellent reference. You will not be blacklisted. I'll make certain of that." The words made no sense. She tried to reorder them in her mind, to find the angle, the hidden cost, the strings attached to this offer. 6 months severance was nearly $23,000, plus a reference. That would buy Maria almost a year of medication. That would give Elena time to figure out what came next. "You'd give me a reference? After what happened?" Marcus's jaw tightened. "Elena, you did nothing wrong. I'm the one who should be reported. And if you want to go to the police, if you want to sue me, I won't fight it. You deserve justice." She stared at him, truly looked at him for perhaps the first time since arriving in this penthouse. She saw not the cold billionaire from the conference call, not the distant employer who left him personal notes, but something raw and human that she had not expected to find. Genuine remorse, shame, the vulnerability of someone who had broken his own carefully constructed rules about emotion and could not figure out how to return to equilibrium. "I don't want to sue you, Mr. Thorne. I just want to forget it happened. I can't forget it because I saw your face last night. I saw how frightened you were. And I realized something. For 6 months, you've been invisible to me. Not because you're not worth seeing, but because I made you invisible. I treated you like furniture. And that's unacceptable." Tears burned Elena's eyes, though she refused to let them fall. "Most people don't even notice people like me exist. Then most people are blind, and I've been the blindest of all." He pulled out one of the kitchen stools and sat down heavily, something he had never done while she was working. The gesture felt significant, lowering himself to her level rather than towering over her, removing the physical manifestation of power imbalance. "Can I ask you something? And please be honest. After you send money to your grandmother, what do you have left?" Elena's instinct was to deflect, to maintain the professional boundary between employer and employee, but something in his expression, not pity, but genuine desire to understand, made her answer truthfully. $1,000 for everything: food, phone, transportation, clothes. Marcus went completely still. Then, $1,000 in Manhattan. I manage. Elena, I made $47 million last quarter. Just me, personally, after taxes and expenses. You made $11,400 in that same period. And you're supporting another person while I can't even remember to eat the meals you make for me. The comparison hung in the air between them. Elena had never allowed herself to think about the grotesque disparity between their lives. Thinking about it served no purpose. The world was unfair. The world had always been unfair. Her job was to survive within that unfairness, not to rail against it. But Marcus looked stricken, as though he had just discovered something fundamentally wrong with the architecture of his existence. I think I've been living wrong for a very long time, he said quietly. Elena had no response to that. She simply stood there, coffee pot in hand, watching a billionaire have some kind of existential crisis in her presence. Finally, Marcus stood. I should let you get back to work. But Elena, if you need anything, if anything makes you uncomfortable, please tell me. You're not just staff, you're a person, and you deserve to be treated with dignity. He left the kitchen. Elena set down the coffee pot and gripped the counter to steady herself. Something had shifted fundamentally in the last 12 hours, something she could not yet name or understand. The man who had walked into her room last night was the same man who had just apologized with what appeared to be genuine remorse. The employer who had ignored her for 6 months had just acknowledged her humanity. She did not know what to do with any of it, so she did what she always did. She returned to work. She cleaned. She organized. She maintained the infrastructure of his life while trying to ignore the fact that her own life had just tilted on its axis in ways she could not yet calculate. The following Monday, Marcus came home at 7 in the evening instead of his usual 11. Elena was in the kitchen preparing dinner, roasted chicken with herbs she had grown in small pots on the windowsill, mashed potatoes, green beans. Comfort food from Georgia that reminded her of Sunday dinners with her grandmother. She heard his footsteps and tensed, uncertain whether the new dynamic between them would hold or whether they would slip back into the comfortable pattern of mutual invisibility. His voice came from the doorway. Good evening, Elena. How was your day? She turned, spatula in hand. He had removed his suit jacket and loosened his tie. The question itself was so unprecedented that she struggled to formulate a response. Fine, sir. Dinner will be ready in 20 minutes. Thank you, and please, when we're alone like this, call me Marcus. The request landed between them like a stone dropped in still water. Calling him by his first name would shatter the last barrier of professional distance. It would acknowledge that something had fundamentally changed, that they were no longer simply employer and employee, but two people who had seen each other in moments of vulnerability. Elena did not respond, unwilling to commit to a boundary she might need later. She turned back to the stove, checking the chicken temperature with a practiced hand. Marcus lingered. How is your grandmother's health? She's managing. Thank you for asking. What's her name? The question caught Elena off guard. In 6 months, he had never asked about Maria, had never shown any interest in the person whose medical bills structured Elena's entire financial existence. Maria Reyes. That's a beautiful name. He said nothing else, but he did not leave either. He stood in the kitchen doorway, watching her work with an attention that made her skin prickle with awareness. Finally, he moved to the small breakfast bar and sat on one of the stools, something he had never done. The kitchen was her domain. He ate his meals in the dining room or at his desk, consuming food as efficiently as he did everything else. Can I help with anything? Elena almost dropped the spatula. No, sir, I have it under control. I'm sure you do. You have everything under control. That's what you do, isn't it? Control the chaos of my life so I don't have to think about the practical details of existing. There was no response that felt safe, so Elena said nothing. She transferred the chicken to a serving platter, arranged the vegetables with the care she had learned from her grandmother. Presentation matters, mija, even when times are hard. She set everything on the breakfast bar rather than the formal dining table, a small rebellion against protocol. Marcus served himself in silence. Then, will you eat with me? I usually eat after you're finished, sir. I know, but I'm asking if you'll make an exception tonight. Elena hesitated, then fixed herself a small plate and sat on the stool farthest from him. They ate without speaking for several minutes. She waited for him to explain this new behavior, to reveal what he wanted from her, but he simply ate the food she had prepared with what appeared to be genuine appreciation. Finally, this is excellent, better than anything I've had at restaurants that charge $300 a plate. It's just chicken, my grandmother's recipe. Tell me about her. The invitation to share personal information felt like a trap, but his expression held only curiosity. Elena put down her fork, considering how much to reveal. She raised me after my parents died. I was 16. Car accident. Drunk driver ran a red light. She was already in her early 60s, living on Social Security and a small pension from 30 years working at the textile mill. She took me in without question, told me we'd figure it out together. That must have been difficult, losing your parents and having to start over. It was, but Maria never let me feel like a burden. She worked part-time at the diner, picked up sewing work on the side. I got a job at the pharmacy after school. We made it work. And now you're making it work for her. Elena met his eyes. That's what family does. You take care of each other. Something flickered across Marcus's face. Pain, perhaps, or recognition of something absent in his own life. He looked away, pushed food around his plate. My mother died when I was 16 too. Cancer. I didn't make it home in time to say goodbye. There was a train delay. By the time I reached the hospital, she'd been gone for 40 minutes. The admission hung in the air. Elena saw the boy he must have been, ambitious, driven, focused on achievement, suddenly confronted with the reality that success meant nothing if you were not present for the people who mattered. I'm sorry, that must haunt you. Every day, my father told me at the funeral that she was too soft for this world anyway. That sentiment was a weakness. I think that's when I decided to cut out everything that made me vulnerable. If I couldn't feel, I couldn't be hurt. And has that worked for you? The question came out more directly than Elena intended. Marcus looked at her with something like surprise, as though he had forgotten she was capable of challenging him. No, it built a very expensive prison. On Wednesday, Marcus came home with grocery bags from Whole Foods. Not the usual delivery Elena ordered with careful attention to budget, but 8 bags filled with organic produce, expensive cuts of meat, artisanal bread, imported olive oil, cheese that cost more per pound than Elena had spent on food in a month. Elena found him in the kitchen, unpacking everything with the uncertain movements of someone unfamiliar with his own storage system. Mr. Thorne, I didn't order this. There must be a mistake. No mistake. You cook for both of us. This should be considered a shared household expense. I can't accept this. It's too much. Marcus stopped unpacking and turned to face her fully. Elena, I spend $800 on a single business dinner that I don't even enjoy. The food tastes like cardboard because I'm too busy networking to pay attention to what I'm eating. This, he gestured at the groceries, this is so you can make real meals, so we can both eat something that isn't just fuel. You don't understand. If I accept things from you, then I owe you, and I can't afford to owe anyone. The words came out sharper than she intended, born from years of learning that gifts from people with power always came with strings attached. Teachers who helped with college applications expected constant gratitude and updates. Neighbors who loaned money expected favors in return. The world operated on a ledger of debts, and people like Elena could never quite balance the books. Marcus's expression shifted to something like understanding. You think I'm keeping score? That this is some kind of transaction where I'll demand repayment, isn't it? Rich people don't give without expecting returns. He flinched as though she had struck him. You're right, that's exactly how I've operated my entire life. Every gift, every favor, every relationship has been calculated for maximum return on investment. But I'm trying to be different. I'm trying to be better. Wait, because you make me want to be. The statement settled between them, weighted with implications Elena was not ready to examine. She busied herself with putting away groceries, creating distance through activity. Marcus watched her for another moment, then left the kitchen without pushing further. That night, long after Elena had gone to bed, Marcus sat in his home office staring at his computer screen. He had pulled up the Hospital Foundation website for Valdosta Regional Medical Center. The site had a portal for anonymous donations, allowing benefactors to contribute to patient care funds without public recognition. Marcus navigated through the forms, entering Maria Reyes's information that he had obtained through a discreet background check performed by his executive assistant. The medical bills totaled $43,000 for the current year. Specialist appointments, medications, emergency room visits, cardiac monitoring equipment, Medicare-covered portions, but Maria was drowning in copays and uncovered expenses. Marcus looked at the number. $43,000. He had spent more than that on a watch he wore maybe twice a month. He entered his credit card information and made the donation, checking the box for complete anonymity. No acknowledgement to the family. No paper trail connecting the gift to his name. The confirmation page loaded. Payment processed. Maria Reyes's account balance, 0. Marcus closed the laptop and sat in the dark. For the first time in the 15 years, he had done something with absolutely no expectation of return. No tax benefit, no publicity, no leverage for future negotiations. He had helped someone because helping them was the right thing to do, because their granddaughter was slowly killing herself to keep them alive, because the universe had given him more money than he could spend in 3 lifetimes while other people chose between medication and food. The action felt strange, foreign, like exercising a muscle he had deliberately atrophied through years of aggressive capitalism. But it also felt necessary, as though some part of him that had been suffocating for decades had finally found a small pocket of air. On Friday evening, Marcus entered the kitchen to find Elena at the small table, writing in a notebook with careful, practiced script. She looked up when she heard him, quickly closing the book as though he had caught her doing something illicit. "I'm sorry. I can move." "No, please. Don't let me interrupt. What are you writing?" Elena hesitated, weighing the risks of honesty. "Letters to my grandmother. I write one every week. She must love receiving them. She can't read them anymore. Her vision is too poor. Mrs. Patterson, our neighbor, reads them to her on Saturday mornings over coffee." Marcus moved closer, careful not to invade her space. "May I ask what you write about?" "The city, the lights, the way rain sounds different this high up, the noise that never stops. Things she'll never see in person." "You make it sound magical." Elena's smile was sad. "I skip the hard parts, the loneliness, how much I miss her. If she knew how I really felt, she'd tell me to come home, but I can't. She needs the money." The raw honesty of the statement gutted Marcus. Here was a 24-year-old woman sacrificing her own happiness, her education, her entire future for someone she loved. And he had lived 38 years without ever loving anyone that way, without ever putting another person's needs above his own desires. You're sacrificing your happiness for hers. That's what love is, isn't it? Putting someone else first? Marcus had no answer. His marriages had been about compatibility and convenience. His relationships with his ex-wives had been partnerships of mutual benefit that dissolved when the cost-benefit analysis no longer made sense. He had never experienced the kind of selfless devotion Elena described so casually, as though it were simply the natural order of things rather than something extraordinary. "I don't know. I've never loved anyone that way." Elena looked at him with something that might have been pity. "That's the saddest thing I've ever heard." The next morning, Marcus woke earlier than usual. He had not slept well, troubled by dreams of his mother playing piano in an empty concert hall while he sat in business meetings, ignoring her phone calls. At 7 o'clock, he walked toward the kitchen and heard music. Classical music. Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, the piece his mother had been practicing the week before her diagnosis, the week before everything changed. He found Elena at the stove making pancakes, wireless earbuds in her ears, swaying slightly to the music only she could hear. She had not noticed his presence. For perhaps 30 seconds, Marcus simply watched her move through the kitchen with unconscious grace, her body responding to the music in ways that suggested genuine appreciation rather than passive listening. She turned to reach for the spatula and jumped when she saw him standing there. Her hand flew to her chest, earbuds tumbling out. "I'm sorry, I'll turn it off. I thought you were still asleep." "No, please. I haven't heard music in this apartment in 5 years." Elena's surprise was evident. "You don't listen to music?" "My mother was a concert pianist. After she died, I stopped. It hurt too much. Understanding softened her features. She picked up her phone and held it out to him. Do you want to listen? Together? Marcus took the phone, saw the playlist she had curated. Chopin, Brahms, Rachmaninoff, Tchaikovsky, his mother's favorites. He put one earbud in his ear, handed the other back to Elena. She placed it in hers, and they stood together in the kitchen, connected by thin white wires and the ghost of Sergei Rachmaninoff's genius. The music swelled around them. Marcus closed his eyes and saw his mother at the piano, her hands moving across the keys with practiced confidence, her face serene in concentration. He had taken those moments for granted, had been too busy with homework and extracurriculars to simply sit and listen. Now, standing in his kitchen 22 years later, with a woman he barely knew, he finally understood what he had lost. When the piece ended, he opened his eyes to find Elena watching him with gentle concern. Are you okay? I will be. Thank you for sharing that with me. Music shouldn't be experienced alone. It's meant to connect people. The observation carried weight beyond its simple truth. Marcus had spent 2 decades alone, convinced that isolation was strength. Elena was showing him piece by piece that connection was not weakness, but the thing that made survival bearable. Later that day, Marcus made a decision that surprised even himself. He called his assistant with instructions to acquire 2 tickets to the New York Philharmonic's performance the following Saturday. Orchestra level, center seats. Then he spent 20 minutes composing a text message to Elena, deleting and rewriting until the words felt right. The message finally sent read, "The Philharmonic is performing Rachmaninoff's second concerto next Saturday. Would you like to go? Not as employer and employee, as 2 people who both love the same music. I don't want to go alone." He stared at his phone for 15 minutes before her response came. "I don't have anything to wear to Carnegie Hall. I'll arrange for someone to bring options. Elena, please, let me do this. Not for you, for me. I need to start living again." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, "Only if you let me pay you back for the dress, installments." Marcus smiled despite himself. Even accepting help, she insisted on maintaining her independence, on ensuring the exchange did not create debt she could not repay. Deal. Saturday afternoon, a personal shopper arrived at the penthouse with garment bags containing 6 dresses, ranging from cocktail length to full evening gown. Elena disappeared into her room to try them on while Marcus pretended to work in his office, though he accomplished nothing except refreshing his email repeatedly. When she emerged an hour later, she wore a simple navy dress that hit just below her knees. The cut was elegant without being ostentatious, classic without being boring. She had left her hair down for the first time since he had known her, dark waves falling past her shoulders. With minimal makeup and the silver earrings that were apparently her only jewelry, she looked younger than 24, uncertain and hopeful and beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with the dress. Marcus stood from his desk, momentarily at a loss for words. "You look beautiful." Color rose in her cheeks. The shopper said this one was appropriate. "I've never been to anything like this before." "Neither have I, not in a very long time." The car ride to Carnegie Hall was initially silent. Elena sat with her hands folded in her lap, watching Manhattan slide past the tinted windows. Marcus noticed she was breathing carefully, deliberately, the way people did when trying to manage anxiety. Nervous? Terrified. What if I do something wrong? What if I clap at the wrong time or laugh at something serious? Then you'll have done what half the audience does anyway. Elena, there's no wrong way to experience music. Just feel what you feel. She turned to look at him, searching his face for mockery and finding none. Is that what your mother taught you? Yes, she used to say that music was meant to be felt, not understood, that the people who sat there analyzing technique and structure were missing the point entirely. I would have liked her. She would have loved you. The admission surprised them both. Marcus had not intended to reveal that much, but the truth of it settled around them with quiet certainty. Diane Thorne, who had possessed more compassion in her smallest finger than Richard Thorne had in his entire body, would have recognized Elena's goodness immediately. Carnegie Hall rose before them, its facade lit against the darkening sky. Elena's breath caught as they entered the lobby, her eyes going wide at the marble columns, the crystal chandeliers, the velvet everywhere. Marcus watched her face rather than the architecture he had seen dozens of times. Seeing wonder reflected in her expression made the familiar space new again, transformed it from just another venue into something worth appreciating. They found their seats in the orchestra section, close enough to see the musicians' expressions. Elena sat on the edge of her seat, program clutched in both hands, vibrating with anticipation. When the lights dimmed and the conductor raised his baton, Marcus found himself watching her more than the performance. The music began, tentative piano notes building to the full orchestra's embrace. Elena leaned forward, completely absorbed. During the Adagio sostenuto, the slow, melancholic second movement, tears slipped down her face. She did not wipe them away, did not seem to notice their presence. She was wholly present in the music, letting it move through her without resistance. Marcus pulled out his handkerchief, monogrammed, a gift from his mother on his 16th birthday that he had kept for 22 years. He handed it to Elena silently. She accepted it, pressed it briefly to her eyes, whispered her thanks. The gesture felt more intimate than it should have, this small exchange of cloth and consideration. When the final movement concluded with its triumphant, joyful finale, Elena's face transformed. Pure delight replaced the earlier melancholy. She turned to Marcus, eyes bright, and mouthed words she would speak later. Thank you. During intermission, they escaped to the rooftop terrace where other patrons gathered for champagne and conversation. Elena stood at the railing, looking out over the city. Are you okay? She laughed through the tears still drying on her face. I'm more than okay. I don't have words for what I just experienced. That was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard in my entire life. It's only the first half. There's more. I might not survive the second half. Then we'll survive it together. Something shifted in the air between them. Elena turned from the railing to face him fully, and Marcus saw himself reflected in her eyes. Not the CEO, not the billionaire, not the twice-divorced man who had forgotten how to feel anything. Just a person trying to remember what it meant to be alive. After the concert ended and the final applause faded, they walked back to the car in companionable silence. Light rain had started, misting everything with a fine sheen. Marcus offered his jacket. Elena accepted this time, letting him drape it over her shoulders. The jacket dwarfed her, made her look smaller and somehow more precious. They were 2 blocks from the penthouse when Marcus asked the driver to pull over. He turned to Elena in the back seat, his heart beating harder than it had during any business negotiation. I need to tell you something. That night I walked in on you. It wasn't the first time I noticed you. Elena went very still. What do you mean? 3 weeks before that happened, I came home early, around 6 in the evening, unusual for me. You were in the living room dancing while you dusted. You had headphones on. You didn't see me standing there, and I watched you for 5 minutes. Because you looked free, happy, everything I wasn't and couldn't remember how to be. You never said anything. Because I was afraid, of feeling, of wanting something I couldn't control. So I avoided you even harder, made myself colder, built the walls higher, and then that night happened, and I couldn't hide anymore. Rain fell harder now, drumming on the car roof, creating a cocoon of sound around them. Elena's voice came quiet but steady. What are you saying? I'm saying you cracked something open in me, something I thought was sealed permanently, and I can't put it back together. I don't want to put it back together. Marcus, I'm scared. Scared this is temporary. Scared you'll wake up 3 months from now and realize I'm just a girl from Georgia who doesn't belong in your world. Scared that when reality sets in, you'll regret everything. He reached across the seat, not quite touching her hand, but close enough that she could feel the heat of his palm. And I'm scared you'll realize I'm just a broken man who doesn't know how to love anyone, who destroyed 2 marriages because I couldn't let anyone in, who built a fortress and called it success, who's so damaged that maybe I'm beyond repair. Then maybe we're both scared for good reasons. Or maybe being scared means it matters. Maybe fear is just proof that we're risking something real. Elena looked at their hands separated by the smallest distance, trembling with the possibility of connection. I don't know how to do this. I've never... I've spent so long just surviving that I don't know how to do anything else. Neither do I. But maybe we can figure it out together. The car pulled up to the building. Marcus wanted to kiss her, wanted to close the gap between them and make the moment concrete. But he understood that moving too fast would shatter whatever fragile thing was building between them. So he simply helped her from the car, held the building door, rode the elevator to the 47th floor in silence that felt charged with potential. At the penthouse door, Elena returned his jacket. Thank you for tonight, for the music, for seeing me. Thank you for reminding me that I'm capable of seeing. She disappeared into her room. Marcus stood in the living room for a long time, still wearing his concert clothes, replaying every moment of the evening. Something fundamental had shifted. The walls he had built so carefully were not just cracking, they were crumbling entirely. The next morning, Marcus made coffee before Elena woke. He set out 2 cups, waited at the breakfast bar like a nervous teenager, rather than a billionaire used to controlling every variable. When she emerged at 5:30, already dressed in her uniform, she stopped short at seeing him there. Good morning. Good morning, I made coffee. She accepted the cup, their fingers brushing in the exchange. The contact lasted perhaps 2 seconds, but seemed to carry the weight of every unspoken thing between them. Elena, I need to talk to you about something important. Please sit. Alarm flickered across her face, the instinctive fear of someone for whom serious conversations usually meant loss. But she sat, wrapping both hands around the coffee mug as though its warmth could protect her. I'm terminating your employment as my housekeeper. Effective today. All color drained from her face. The mug shook in her hands. You're firing me. I'm ending your employment in this capacity because I can't do this, whatever this is between us. While you work for me, the power imbalance isn't fair to you. It's not right. But I need this job. My grandmother will be taken care of. Elena, please listen to the full proposal before you panic. She set down the coffee mug, hands clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles went white. Marcus had rehearsed this conversation a dozen times, but now, facing her fear, all his carefully prepared words felt inadequate. I want to offer you a different position. Director of Corporate Social Responsibility at Thorn Tech. Starting salary, $90,000 per year, with potential to reach $180,000 once you've proven yourself in the role. Elena's mouth opened, but no sound emerged. She stared at him as though he had started speaking a foreign language. You're offering me a job I'm not qualified for, a job that requires business experience I don't have, a degree I don't possess. You have something more valuable than a degree. You understand what it's like to struggle. You know what real people need when corporations fail them. My company made $11 billion in profit last year. We gave $40 million to charity. That's 0.36%. It's obscene. And it's happening because everyone making decisions has never lived in the real world. They've never chosen between medication and rent, never worked 3 jobs and still come up short. You have, and that perspective is exactly what we need. People will say I slept with you for this position. Probably. And you'll prove them wrong by doing excellent work. This is insane. You're offering me nearly $100,000 to do a job I don't understand. I'm offering you independence. Right now, you depend on me for survival. That's not fair. If I want to pursue whatever this is between us, you need to be able to walk away, to choose me because you want to, not because you need to. Elena stood abruptly, pacing the small kitchen space. This is too much. It's too fast. You're trying to rescue me, and I don't need rescue. I need to stand on my own. Then stand, but stand in a position where you can actually make a difference, where you can help people the way you wish someone had helped you. She stopped pacing, turned to face him, the tears streaming down her face. Why are you doing this? Really? Marcus stood, closed the distance between them carefully, giving her space to retreat if she needed it. Because 6 months ago, I met someone who made me want to be better. Not richer, not more successful, better. And that terrifies me, because better means vulnerable. Better means admitting that I've been wrong about almost everything for 2 decades. Better means I have to actually care about something beyond profit margins and market domination. I'm scared too, Scared that you're going to wake up and realize that fixing me was just another project, that once I'm stable and independent, you'll lose interest. Elena, I don't want to fix you. You're not broken, but I am. And somehow you make me think that maybe broken things can still be useful, that maybe it's not too late for me to become someone my mother would have been proud of. She looked at him for a long moment, searching for deception or manipulation and finding only raw honesty. Finally, I'll accept the position, but on three conditions. One, I pay back every cent of my grandmother's medical bills that you paid anonymously last week. Marcus froze. How did you, Mrs. Patterson called. The hospital told her that an anonymous donor covered everything. It wasn't hard to figure out who. I'm grateful truly, but I won't be in your debt. Elena, that's condition one. Take it or the deal's off. Two, I start at 90,000 and earn my way to more. I won't accept money I haven't proven I deserve. Three, give me 6 months to prove myself. If I fail, I leave with no severance and no reference. Clean break. Those terms are ridiculous. You're negotiating against your own interests. I'm negotiating for my dignity. I won't be your charity case. I won't be your redemption project. If I do this, I do it on my terms, or I don't do it at all. Marcus felt something like pride swell in his chest. Here was a woman with nothing, facing down a billionaire and demanding respect rather than mercy. She was refusing the easy path, insisting on earning what she received even when she could simply accept it. Deal, all three conditions. You start Monday. Elena extended her hand for a formal shake. Marcus took it, felt the calluses on her palm from years of manual labor, the strength in her grip. They stood there in his kitchen, hands clasped, sealing an agreement that was about so much more than employment. I need to call my grandmother, Elena said finally, releasing his hand. Tell her I'm changing jobs. She'll worry. Of course. Take the day. Move your things from the staff quarters to your own apartment. My own what? You can't live here anymore. Not if we're going to do this properly. I've arranged a 2-bedroom in Chelsea, first month paid, security deposit covered. After that, your salary covers rent. Marcus, I can't accept. You can, because it's not a gift. It's a standard corporate relocation package. Any executive moving to New York for a position at Thorn Tech receives the same benefit. She looked at him with something between exasperation and reluctant admiration. You've thought of everything. I've had a week of sleepless nights to plan. Believe me, I've considered every possible objection and worked out solutions for all of them. Elena laughed, a sound that seemed startled out of her. You're impossible. I'm practical. There's a difference. She left to make her phone call. Marcus stood in the kitchen, his untouched coffee growing cold, and realized he was smiling. Actually smiling, not the professional expression he wore in business meetings, but genuine pleasure at the memory of Elena's laugh, at her stubborn insistence on maintaining her independence, at the possibility of building something real with someone who refused to be bought. 2 weeks later, Elena sat in a conference room at Thorn Tech headquarters, surrounded by 12 executives who looked at her with varying degrees of skepticism. She wore a suit purchased from a second-hand store on the Upper West Side, $200 she could barely afford, but absolutely necessary for credibility. Her portfolio clutched notes she had written and rewritten a dozen times, research compiled during 14-hour days of learning everything she could about corporate social responsibility. The CFO, Robert Brennan, spoke first. Ms. Reyes, with all respect, what qualifies you to oversee initiatives that will affect our entire company culture? Elena had prepared for this question, had known it would come from someone exactly like Brennan. Stanford MBA, 20 years in corporate finance, unable to see value in anything that did not appear on a balance sheet. Mr. Brennan, with respect, you're right that I don't have an MBA. I don't have a degree at all. What I do have is 2 years of experience surviving on $1,000 per month in Manhattan. I know what it's like to choose between phone service and shoes, between winter coat and doctor visit, between dignity and survival. That's the perspective your Harvard MBAs can't provide. Brennan smiled condescendingly. And you think that qualifies you to make decisions about billion-dollar programs? I think it qualifies me to identify what's missing. You have brilliant people who can maximize profit. I can help identify where that profit comes from human cost. So we should sacrifice profit for sentiment? We should recognize that profit built on exploitation is unsustainable. High turnover costs you millions. Low morale costs you millions more. Treating people with dignity isn't sentiment, it's smart business. Marcus, sitting at the head of the table, said nothing. He had promised Elena he would not interfere, that she would need to establish her own credibility. But she could see the tension in his jaw, the way his hands gripped the armrests when Brennan's tone grew more dismissive. Another executive, Patricia Holbrook, spoke. Even if we accept your premise, Ms. Reyes, you've been here 2 weeks. How can you possibly understand our company culture well enough to recommend changes? I spent the last 2 weeks interviewing 40 employees, janitors, security guards, cafeteria workers, junior developers. I asked them what they needed, what made their jobs harder, what would make their lives better. The answers were remarkably consistent. Elena opened her portfolio and distributed copies of her findings. 73% report that childcare costs consume more than 30% of their income. 61% have delayed medical care due to inadequate insurance coverage. 48% work second jobs to afford rent in cities where you've placed offices. These aren't abstractions. These are your people telling you they're drowning. The room fell silent as executives reviewed her research. Elena waited, her heart pounding, but her expression calm. She had learned long ago that showing fear invited attack. Finally, Marcus spoke. Elena, what are you proposing? Raise minimum wage for all Thorn Tech employees to $25 per hour. Cost, approximately $34 million annually. Provide comprehensive health care, including dental and vision for all employees, part-time and full-time. Cost, $18 million. Childcare subsidies of $500 per month per child under 12. Cost, $12 million. Total impact, $64 million per year, or 0.58% of annual profit. Brennan's voice was ice. You want us to spend $64 million to make employees more comfortable? I want you to spend $64 million to increase productivity, decrease turnover, and improve brand perception. You'll recoup the investment within 3 years through reduced hiring costs alone. Those are projections, hopes, not guarantees. Neither are your quarterly forecasts, but you make billion-dollar decisions based on them. The conference room erupted in argument. Half the executives supported Elena's proposals, recognizing the long-term strategic value. The other half dismissed them as naive idealism that would tank their competitive position. Marcus called for a vote. The proposals passed by a single vote. As the meeting adjourned, Patricia pulled Marcus aside. This is a mistake. That girl has no idea what she's doing. You're letting personal feelings compromise your business judgment. Patricia, my business judgment created an $11 billion company. I think I've earned the right to try something new. And when this fails, when employees take advantage and productivity drops, then I'll have learned something valuable. But I don't think it will fail. I think we've been failing for years by treating people as expendable resources. Elena's approach isn't radical. It's basic human decency, and it's long overdue. Patricia shook her head and left. Marcus found Elena in her new office, a small space on the 55th floor with a window overlooking the city. She stood at that window, trembling slightly, the adrenaline of confrontation finally catching up to her. You were magnificent in there. Elena turned, tears streaming down her face. I thought I was going to throw up the entire time. You hit it well. Elena, you just convinced some of the most skeptical people in corporate America to invest $64 million in employee welfare. Do you understand how significant that is? I understand that they all think I'm your mistress who got promoted because I'm sleeping with you. The accusation hung between them. Marcus moved closer but did not touch her, respecting the professional boundary they had worked so hard to establish. Let them think what they want. You're going to prove them wrong through your work, through results they can't dismiss or diminish. And what about us? Is there an us, or am I imagining this entire thing? There's definitely an us, but we're building it slowly, carefully, making sure that every step we take is because we both want it, not because circumstances pushed us together. Elena wiped her eyes, managed a shaky laugh. So what you're saying is you're falling in love with me, but we're going to be very professional about it. The words stopped Marcus's heart. Love. She had named the thing he had been circling around for weeks, too afraid to label it, too scarred by previous failures to trust that what he felt was real. Yes, I suppose that's exactly what I'm saying. Is that okay? It's terrifying, but also maybe the best thing that's ever happened to me. Then we're terrified together. I can live with that. The Monday morning after her first successful board presentation, Elena arrived at Thorn Tech to find 15 reporters camped outside the building entrance. Cameras swung toward her as she approached. Questions erupted from multiple directions, overlapping into incomprehensible noise. She kept her head down, pushed through the crowd, and made it to the elevator bank before her hands started shaking. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number contained a link. She clicked it despite every instinct screaming not to. The New York Post website loaded, front page headline in bold. Billionaire Thorne's new director. Former Maid 24 gets 90K job after moving into his penthouse. The article included photographs. Elena entering the penthouse 6 months ago, pulling a single suitcase. Elena leaving the building 2 weeks ago with the same suitcase. Side-by-side images designed to suggest a narrative of opportunism and calculation. The text was worse. Half facts, half speculation, all of it designed to paint her as a gold digger who had manipulated her way into a corporate position through sexual favors. Quotes from unnamed sources close to the situation described her as unqualified, inexperienced, clearly promoted due to personal relationship with Marcus Thorne. The article mentioned her lack of college degree, her previous employment as household staff, her sudden elevation to a six-figure salary position. It stopped just short of explicitly calling her a prostitute, but the implications saturated every paragraph. Elena made it to her office and closed the door before the tears came. She had known this would happen, had warned Marcus that people would assume the worst. But knowing intellectually that public judgment was coming was different from experiencing it, from seeing her photograph circulated with commentary that reduced her entire existence to her supposed sexual availability. Her phone rang. Marcus. She let it go to voicemail. It rang again immediately. This time she answered. Have you seen it? Yes. Elena, I'm so sorry. My PR team is working on a response. I need to resign. Today. Right now. No. Marcus, they're destroying my reputation. My grandmother will see this. Everyone I know in Georgia will see this. I'll never work again. I'll never be anything except the girl who slept her way into a job she didn't deserve. Then we fight back. Together. We show them who you really are. How? The truth sounds worse than the lie. Yes, I was his housekeeper. Then he gave me a corporate position, but I swear we weren't sleeping together. No one will believe that. Then we make them believe. Elena, please, don't quit. Don't let them win. Why would you risk your company for me? Your reputation? Everything you've built? The answer came without hesitation. Because you're worth it. Because for the first time in my life, I'm choosing what's right over what's easy. Don't quit on me. Don't quit on yourself. She sat in silence, phone pressed to her ear, listening to him breathe. Finally, okay. But I do this my way. I'm not hiding. I'm not apologizing. I'm going to work, and I'm going to prove them wrong through results. That's my girl. I'm not your girl, yet. His voice carried a smile. Yet. I'll take yet. Elena hung up and forced herself to stand. She checked her reflection in the small mirror by the door. Eyes red, face blotchy, but she could fix that. She walked to the bathroom, washed her face with cold water, reapplied minimal makeup. When she returned to her office, she opened her laptop and got to work as though the entire world was not currently tearing her apart on social media. By noon, the hashtag #ThornMaid scandal was trending nationally. Twitter exploded with opinions. Instagram circulated her photo with captions ranging from crude to cruel. LinkedIn filled with think pieces about inappropriate workplace relationships and corporate nepotism. Reddit devoted 3 separate threads to analyzing whether she was a victim or a predator, with the majority opinion landing firmly on predator. Elena forced herself to read some of it. needed to understand what she was facing. The comments ranged from dismissive to vicious. Users called her a whore, a gold digger, a manipulative bitch who had trapped a vulnerable billionaire. Others called Marcus a predator who had taken advantage of a young employee. A few voices defended them, suggesting that two adults could have a legitimate relationship, but those were drowned in the tide of judgment. At 2 o'clock, Marcus called an emergency press conference. Elena watched from her office on the live stream feed. He stood at a podium in the Thorntech main lobby, cameras pointed at him from every angle, reporters packed into every available space. I'm here to address speculation about Ms. Elena Reyes and her position at Thorntech. 6 months ago, I hired Elena as household staff. I barely spoke to her. I barely saw her as a person. That was my failure, not hers. The room erupted in shouted questions. Marcus waited for silence before continuing. 2 months ago, I made a mistake that forced me to actually be Elena. What I saw was someone with more integrity, more intelligence, and more compassion than most people I've worked with in my entire career. I offered her a position at my company because she was qualified, not because of any personal relationship, which at the time did not exist. A reporter shouted, "And now, is there a personal relationship now?" Yes, and it began after I ensured there was no professional power imbalance between us. I terminated her employment as household staff. I helped her establish independent housing. I created a position where she reports to multiple supervisors, not just to me, because I refuse to be a man who uses power to exploit anyone. But she has no degree, no corporate experience. How is she qualified? She understands struggle in ways Harvard graduates never will. She knows what it costs to survive when the system fails you. That perspective is worth more than any degree. The questions came harder, sharper. Marcus deflected most, answered others with careful precision, but Elena could see the strain in his face, the tension in his shoulders. He was taking fire meant for both of them, trying to shield her even as she watched from a distance. When the press conference ended, Elena's phone rang immediately. Mrs. Patterson from Georgia, her voice shaky with concern. "Honey, your grandmother saw the news. She wants to talk to you." Elena's heart stopped. "Is she okay?" "She's upset, worried about you, but she's strong. Hold on." Her grandmother's voice came through, thinner than Elena remembered, but still carrying that bedrock strength that had sustained them both through so many crises. "Elena, mija, I saw what they're saying about you. Abuela, I'm so sorry. I didn't want you to find out like this. I didn't want you to worry." "Hush, child, let me talk." Elena fell silent, tears already streaming down her face. "When your parents died, you were 16. You could have given up, gone into foster care, let the state handle you. But you didn't. You stayed with me. You took care of me even though you were just a baby yourself. You sacrificed everything for an old woman who should have been taking care of you. You're not old. You're my everything. And you're mine. So I want to ask you something. This man, Marcus, is he good to you?" Elena's voice came out small, honest. "Yes, Abuela. He's complicated. But he's good. He sees me. Not what I can do for him, but who I am." "Does he make you happy?" "Yes. When I'm with him, I feel like I matter. Like I'm not just surviving, but actually living." "Then don't let them take him from you. Don't let them make you ashamed. You've spent 8 years being ashamed of being poor, of not having a degree, of needing help. Stop. You are Elena Maria Reyes. You are my granddaughter. You are brilliant and strong and worthy of every good thing. You hear me?" "I hear you, Abuela." "Then fight, mija, like I taught you, like your mama taught you. We don't run from battles, we win them." After they said goodbye, Elena sat with the phone in her lap, her grandmother's words settling around her like armor. She had been prepared to resign, to slink back to Georgia in defeat. But Maria Reyes had not raised a quitter. She had raised a fighter. There was a knock on her office door. Elena wiped her face and called for whoever it was to enter. Patricia Holbrook stepped inside, closing the door behind her with deliberate care. "Ms. Reyes, I thought you should know that I filed a formal complaint with the board, requesting Marcus's removal as CEO for conduct detrimental to company reputation. Elena stood slowly, meeting Patricia's gaze directly. You're trying to get him fired because he's dating me. I'm trying to protect shareholder value. Since your relationship became public, our stock price has dropped 11%. We've lost 3 major clients who don't want to be associated with this scandal. Your presence here is costing this company millions. My presence here hasn't cost anything yet. We haven't even implemented my proposals. Your proposals are exactly the problem. $64 million in new spending based on the recommendations of a girl with no business education, no corporate experience, and a very obvious personal bias. Marcus has lost his judgment. He's making decisions with his heart instead of his head, and that makes him a liability. Patricia left without waiting for a response. Elena sank back into her chair, the weight of everything pressing down. The board was moving against Marcus. His company, his empire, everything he had built for 15 years. All of it threatened because he had chosen to see her as human, to offer her opportunity, to pursue something real instead of safe. She pulled up her laptop and began drafting her resignation letter again. This time she would actually send it. This time she would remove herself from the equation before Marcus lost everything. But then she stopped, read her grandmother's words again in her memory. We don't run from battles, we win them. Elena deleted the resignation letter and opened a new document. If Patricia wanted war, Elena would give her data. She would prove that investing in people was not sentiment, but strategy. She would show results that even the most skeptical board member could not dismiss. That evening, Marcus appeared at her apartment door. Elena had not given him the address, but of course he knew it. He had arranged the lease. She opened the door to find him looking more exhausted than she had ever seen him. Still in his suit from the press conference, tie loosened, hair disheveled from running his hands through it repeatedly. I needed to see you, to make sure you're okay. I'm not okay, but I'm still here, still fighting. He stepped inside at her unspoken invitation. The apartment was small by his standards, 2 bedrooms, modest kitchen, furniture from IKEA that Elena had assembled herself. But it was hers, the first space she had occupied as an adult that belonged to her rather than being borrowed or temporary. Patricia filed a complaint. I know, she came to my office to tell me personally. Wanted me to understand that I'm destroying you. Marcus's hands clenched into fists. She had no right. She had every right. Marcus, your stock price dropped 11%. You lost clients. Your board is turning against you. All because of me. All because I chose to do something right for once in my life. Elena, I've spent 15 years prioritizing profit over people. Building an empire on the backs of workers I paid as little as legally possible. Maximizing shareholder value while employees struggle to survive. Patricia represents everything I used to be. If standing against her means losing the company, then maybe the company isn't worth keeping. You don't mean that. Thorntech is your entire life. No, it was my entire life. Past tense. Now I have something that matters more. He moved closer and Elena did not retreat. They stood in her small living room, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him, could see the fine lines of stress around his eyes that had deepened in the last 2 weeks. What if I'm not worth it? What if you sacrifice everything and 3 months from now, you realize that I'm just ordinary? That the specialness you see is just projection, just your own need to be redeemed? Then I'll have learned something valuable about myself. But Elena, I don't think you're ordinary. I think you're the most extraordinary person I've ever met. You take care of everyone around you while nobody takes care of you. You fight for dignity when it would be easier to accept scraps. You see the best in people even when they show you their worst. That's not ordinary. That's exceptional. She reached up, cupped his face in both hands. You're falling in love with me. I fell weeks ago. I just didn't have the courage to say it. I'm falling too, and it terrifies me. Then we'll be terrified together. He kissed her, finally closing the distance they had maintained since that night at Carnegie Hall. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, as though they were both afraid that moving too fast would shatter something fragile. But then Elena's hand slid into his hair and Marcus's arms wrapped around her waist, and the kiss deepened into something desperate and necessary. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Elena rested her forehead against his chest. I need to tell you something about that night when you walked into my room. Marcus stiffened. Elena, we don't have to. Yes, we do, because you need to understand. I wasn't just humiliated, I was terrified. Terrified you would fire me. Terrified you would tell the agency I had done something inappropriate. Terrified my entire life would collapse because you made a mistake. That's what it's like to have no power. Every accident becomes catastrophic because you have no cushion, no safety net, no recourse. I know, I'm so sorry. I'm not looking for another apology. I'm trying to explain why I'm scared now. Because even with the chair, even with the apartment, even with everything you've given me, I'm still the girl who could lose it all tomorrow. Who could wake up and find out this was temporary, that you were temporary. Marcus pulled back enough to look into her eyes. I can't promise I won't make mistakes. I can't promise I won't hurt you because I'm still learning how to be a person who connects instead of conquers. But I can promise that I'm not temporary. I can promise that whatever we're building, I'm committed to it, to you, even when it costs me everything. They're going to try to remove you as CEO. Let them try. I own 51% of voting shares. They can't force me out without my consent. But they can make your life hell. They can sell their shares and tank your stock. They can poison your reputation until no one wants to work with you. Then I'll rebuild. I've done it before. I can do it again. Not if I'm dragging you down. Marcus's voice went sharp. Don't you dare. Don't you dare try to sacrifice yourself to save me. We're partners now. We face this together, or we don't face it at all. Lena searched his face and found only stubborn determination. He meant it. He would burn his empire to the ground before he would let her go. The realization was both thrilling and terrifying. Okay, together, but Marcus, I need you to let me fight my own battles too. I need you to trust that I can handle Patricia and the board and all of it without you riding in to rescue me. That's going to be harder for me than you think. I know, but it's necessary. If people see me as your puppet, they'll never respect me. I have to earn my place here through my own work, not through your protection. He nodded slowly, though she could see the struggle in his expression. I'll try, but if they come at you too hard, then I'll handle it. And if I can't handle it, I'll ask for help. But let me try first. They spent the rest of the evening on her secondhand couch, talking about everything except the crisis swirling around them. Marcus told her about his first startup attempt at 23 that had failed spectacularly, costing him his life savings and teaching him that failure was survivable. Elena told him about her parents, about the night the police came to the door, about how she and Maria had clung to each other in the hospital waiting room, while doctors explained that there was nothing they could do. At midnight, Marcus reluctantly left. They stood at her door, neither wanting to break contact. I'll see you at work tomorrow. We're keeping it professional in the office. Extremely professional. I'll barely acknowledge your existence. Good, because I need people to see me as competent, not as your girlfriend. You're not my girlfriend. Elena's stomach dropped. I'm not? No, you're the woman I'm falling in love with. Girlfriend feels too small for what this is. He kissed her once more and left. Elena leaned against the closed door, hand pressed to her racing heart, feeling like she had just jumped off a cliff and discovered that flying was possible. The emergency board meeting convened on Friday afternoon. 300 shareholders attended either in person or virtually, summoned by Patricia's formal complaint. Marcus sat at the head of the conference room, his expression calm despite the chaos erupting around him. Elena was not present. This was a board matter, and she had no standing to attend. Patricia presented her case with surgical precision. Stock price data showing the 11% decline, client testimonials explaining why they were moving to competitors, analysis of the $64 million spending proposal and its impact on profit margins. She painted Marcus as a man who had lost perspective, who was making emotional decisions that damaged shareholder value. I moved to remove Marcus Thorne as CEO and install interim leadership while we search for a replacement who can restore stability. The vote was called. Marcus watched the tally appear on the screen. 485 votes in favor of removal, 520 votes against. He retained his position by exactly 35 votes, the margin provided by his personal ownership stake. Patricia stood, fury radiating from every line of her body. This isn't over, Marcus. You may have won today, but shareholders have long memories. One more quarter of declining stock price, one more lost client, and they'll turn on you. Marcus's voice remained steady. I respect your right to vote your conscience, Patricia, but I will not apologize for choosing to run this company with integrity rather than pure profit focus. As the meeting adjourned, one board member remained behind. David Chen, 43, had said nothing during the debate, but had voted against removal. He approached Marcus with careful steps. I want you to know why I voted the way I did. David, you don't owe me an explanation. Yes, I do. 15 years ago, I was a junior developer here. You didn't know me, just another employee among thousands. But one night you came through at midnight and saw me still working. You asked why. I told you my daughter had leukemia. Medical bills were bankrupting us. Insurance wouldn't cover the experimental treatment that might save her life. Marcus had no memory of this conversation. 15 years ago, he had been building the company from nothing, working 100 hours a week, barely sleeping. Individual employee interactions had blurred into an indistinct mass. 2 weeks later, the hospital called, said an anonymous donor had covered the entire treatment, $180,000. I had no idea who. It took me 5 years to find out it was you. David, my daughter is alive because of you. She's 17 now, healthy, going to college next year. And you never mentioned it, never asked for credit or gratitude. You just helped because helping was the right thing to do. Marcus felt something tight in his chest. He had forgotten making that donation, lost in the endless stream of decisions and transactions. But David had carried it for 15 years. So when everyone's watching now, when everyone's judging your choices, I want you to know that I see who you are. You're the man who saves lives when nobody's watching. What you're doing with Elena, that's just you being yourself in public instead of private. David left. Marcus sat alone in the conference room, head in his hands, processing the weight of memory returned. He had not always been purely mercenary. Once, occasionally, he had acted from compassion rather than calculation. He had just buried those impulses so deeply that he had forgotten they existed. His phone buzzed, a text from Elena. How did it go? I'm still CEO, barely. Meet me at your place tonight. I need to see you. 3 months passed. Elena threw herself into work with manic focus, determined to prove that Marcus's faith in her was justified. She implemented the employee wage increases, the healthcare expansion, the childcare subsidies. She met with workers in every office location, listening to their needs and concerns with the attention she had once given to her grandmother's medical updates. The results began appearing faster than even Marcus had anticipated. Employee turnover dropped from 34% to 16% in the first quarter. Productivity increased by 28% across all divisions. Glassdoor ratings jumped from 3.2 to 4.7 stars. Applications to work at Thorntech tripled, allowing the company to be more selective in hiring and thereby improving overall talent quality. Business publications noticed. Forbes ran a cover story. Marcus Thorne, the billionaire who chose people over profit and won. Harvard Business Review requested a case study. Fast Company featured Elena in their most creative people in business issue, though the comments section remained brutal with speculation about her relationship with Marcus. Through it all, Elena and Marcus maintained careful professional distance at work. They did not eat lunch together. They did not arrive or leave at the same time. They communicated through official channels and email rather than personal text. To outside observers, they were simply CEO and director working together on company initiatives. But 3 nights a week, Marcus appeared at Elena's apartment with takeout food or groceries to cook together. They talked for hours about business, about family, about the future they were carefully building. He told her about his failed marriages, about the patterns of emotional withdrawal that had destroyed both relationships. She told him about nursing school, about the professors who had seen her potential, about the dreams she had sacrificed that still haunted her. One Saturday evening, Marcus arrived with news. The hospital called today. Not about your grandmother, she's fine, but they want to do a feature on the anonymous donor who's been covering indigent patient care. They tracked the donations back to my foundation. Elena looked up from the pasta she was stirring. What did you tell them? That I'd think about it. Elena, I've been making you donations like that for 15 years. Small ones comparatively. A few thousand here, a few 100,000 there. Medical bills for employees, college funds for workers' children. I did it anonymously because I didn't want recognition, but maybe I should stop hiding it. Maybe transparency would help people understand that wealth can be used for more than just accumulation. Or maybe people would say, you're just trying to buy good publicity. Let them. I know the truth. You know the truth. That's enough. Elena turned off the stove and moved to where Marcus sat at her small kitchen table. She took his hands in hers. I'm proud of you. You've changed so much in 6 months. You're not the same man who walked into my room that night. Neither are you. You've become someone who commands boardrooms and implements a policy. You're not the scared girl who apologized for my mistake. We're both different. Better, I think. Definitely better. They ate dinner side by side, talking about Elena's latest project, a partnership with local community colleges to offer tuition reimbursement for employees pursuing degrees. Marcus listened as she outlined her vision, asking questions that helped her refine the proposal. This was the rhythm they had found, equal partners supporting each other's growth rather than one person rescuing or dominating the other. After dinner, they moved to the couch. Elena curled against Marcus's side, his arm around her shoulders, both of them content with silence and proximity. These moments of quiet intimacy had become Elena's favorite part of their relationship. No performance, no strategy, just two people choosing to share space. Marcus's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and went very still. What is it? My sister. I didn't know she had this number. You have a sister? Half-sister, from my father's second marriage. We haven't spoken in 8 years. He opened the message, read it twice, then handed the phone to Elena. The text was brief. Dad died this morning. Heart attack. Funeral is Thursday in Greenwich. Thought you should know. Elena watched Marcus's face, trying to read his reaction. His expression remained neutral, but she felt the tension radiating through his body. Are you okay? I don't know. I haven't spoken to him since my mother's funeral. He didn't approve of me starting the company. Thought I should join his law firm, carry on the family legacy. When I refused, he cut me off financially. Told me I was wasting my potential on childish fantasies. And now he's gone. And now he's gone. And I don't know how I'm supposed to feel about that. Elena took his hand. However you feel is valid. You don't owe him grief just because he's your father. But if you want to go to the funeral, I'll go with you. You do that? Face his family and friends who will absolutely judge you for being with me? I'd face worse for you. Besides, they've been judging me on the internet for months. I'm getting used to it. Marcus pulled her close, buried his face in her hair. I love you. I should have said it before now, but I was scared. Scared I'd mess it up like I've messed up everything else. But I love you, Elena. You make me believe I can be better than my worst impulses. I love you too. Even when you're impossible and overprotective and trying to solve all my problems for me, I'm working on that. I know, and I love you for trying. They sat together until late into the night, Marcus processing grief for a father he had hated and loved in equal measure. Elena held him through the complicated emotions, offering presence rather than solutions, understanding that sometimes love meant simply bearing witness to pain. On Thursday, they drove to Greenwich in Marcus's Tesla. The funeral was at the Episcopal Church where Marcus had been baptized 38 years ago. The parking lot filled with expensive cars. Mercedes, BMW, Lexus, sedans driven by attorneys and executives who had orbited Richard Thorne's professional life. Marcus's half-sister Victoria met them at the church entrance. She was 32, blonde, perfectly composed in designer black. Her eyes assessed Elena with the kind of calculation that came from growing up in a world where status determined value. Marcus, it's been a long time. Victoria, I'm sorry about Dad. Are you? I wasn't sure you'd come, especially with everything happening with your company. He was still my father. Whatever our issues, he deserved acknowledgement. Victoria's gaze shifted to Elena. And you must be the famous Elena Reyes, the maid turned executive. I've read about you. Elena felt Marcus tense beside her but kept her own voice level. I was his housekeeper. Now I direct corporate social responsibility initiatives. It's nice to meet you, though I wish circumstances were different. I'm sure you do. This must be uncomfortable for you, walking into a room full of people who think you're a gold digger. Victoria, Marcus's voice carried warning. It's okay. Elena squeezed his hand once, then released it. She looked Victoria directly in the eye. Let them think what they want. I know who I am. Marcus knows who I am. Your opinion or theirs doesn't change reality. Something shifted in Victoria's expression. Surprise, perhaps, or grudging respect. You're tougher than you look. I've had to be. The funeral service was traditional and impersonal. The minister spoke about Richard Thorne's professional accomplishments, his service to the legal community, his dedication to excellence. He did not mention warmth or compassion or love. The eulogy painted a picture of a man who had achieved much and connected with few, essentially the path Marcus had been walking before Elena disrupted his trajectory. After the service, the gathering moved to the Thorne family home, a massive colonial that Richard's second wife had decorated in aggressive good taste. Elena stayed close to Marcus as he navigated conversations with people he had not seen in years. Former colleagues of his father's who remembered Marcus as a promising young man who had disappointed everyone by pursuing technology instead of law. Distant relatives who had opinions about his lifestyle choices and were not shy about sharing them. One elderly woman cornered Elena by the refreshment table. So you're the girl who trapped Marcus Thorne. I must say you're prettier than I expected from your photographs. Though of course, photographs can be quite misleading. Elena set down her untouched glass of wine. I didn't trap anyone, ma'am. We're two adults who chose each other, but I appreciate your concern. Concern? My dear, I'm not concerned. I simply think it's fascinating how young women today leverage their assets to secure their futures. Quite different from my generation, but perhaps more honest in its mercenary nature. If you'll excuse me, Marcus will tire of you, you know. Men like him always do. They enjoy the novelty of slumming for a while, but eventually they return to their own class. And when he does, you'll be left with nothing except whatever settlement his lawyers negotiate. Elena felt rage bubble up from somewhere deep and primal. But before she could respond, Marcus appeared at her side. Mrs. Hartford, I see you've met Elena, the woman I'm planning to marry, incidentally, so perhaps you should adjust your expectations about our future accordingly. The woman's face went white. Marcus guided Elena away, his hand firm at the small of her back. They walked out into the garden where other guests could not hear them. Did you just tell Mrs. Hartford we're getting married? I did. Is that a problem? Marcus, you haven't actually asked me to marry you. Would you like me to? I can do it right now. Elena Maria Reyes, will you marry me? That's possibly the least romantic proposal in history. But is it a yes? Elena looked at him, this complicated, damaged man who had somehow become her entire world. Ask me again later, when you're not making a point to your father's horrible friends, when it's just us and you're sure. I'm sure now. But I need to be sure you're asking for the right reasons. Not because Mrs. Hartford insulted me, not because you're grieving your father and feeling reckless, but because you actually want to build a life with me. Marcus pulled her close. I want to build a life with you more than I've wanted anything in my entire existence. But you're right, you deserve better than a proposal made in anger. So I'll ask again, when the time is right. They left the funeral early, driving back to Manhattan in comfortable silence. Elena watched the suburbs give way to city, processing the day's events. Marcus had just told a room full of people he intended to marry her, had claimed her publicly in a way that could not be walked back or reinterpreted. The gesture was both thrilling and terrifying. Back at her apartment, they ordered Chinese food and ate it sitting on the floor with their backs against the couch. Marcus was quiet, processing his father's death and the complicated legacy it left behind. I spent 20 years trying to prove him wrong, trying to show that I could succeed on my own terms without his approval. And now he's gone, and I realize I was still letting him control me, still making decisions based on what he would think. And now I get to choose. I get to decide what success means on my own terms. And Elena, you're part of that definition. You're the most important part. No pressure then. He laughed, the sound surprising them both. Fair point. Let me rephrase. You're not responsible for my redemption. I'm responsible for becoming someone worthy of you. But knowing you exist, knowing you see me as capable of being better, that's a gift I don't take for granted. 1 year after the night that changed everything, Marcus planned an event. Elena knew something was coming, but not what. He had been secretive for weeks, taking phone calls in other rooms, having packages delivered to his office rather than her apartment. On October 23rd, he picked her up at 6 in the evening. She wore the navy dress from their first concert, the one that had become significant through association with that night at Carnegie Hall. Marcus wore a suit without a tie, the combination of formal and accessible that had become his signature. Where are we going? You'll see. They drove to Chelsea, to her apartment building, but instead of going to her unit, Marcus led her up additional flights of stairs she had never climbed. To the roof, Elena stepped out into transformed space. String lights crisscrossed overhead, creating a canopy of warm illumination. A small table for two sat in the center, covered with white cloth and set with simple dishes. Music played from hidden speakers. Rachmaninoff's Second Concerto, of course. Marcus, this is beautiful. What's the occasion? 1 year, since the night I walked into your room and everything changed. You're celebrating the worst mistake you ever made? No, I'm celebrating the best thing that ever happened to me, because that mistake forced me to see you, and seeing you saved my life. He pulled out her chair. Elena sat, overwhelmed by the care evident in every detail. The flowers on the table were wildflowers from Georgia, somehow sourced and arranged despite being out of season. The food was home-cooked, dishes she recognized as her grandmother's recipes that Marcus must have learned to make. Even the dishes were the mismatched vintage china she had mentioned admiring once in a thrift store window. They ate slowly, talking about the year that had passed, the challenges overcome, the growth they had both experienced. Elena had completed an online business certificate from Cornell, maintaining a 4.0 GPA while working 60-hour weeks. Marcus had started therapy, finally processing his mother's death and his father's emotional abuse. Together, they had weathered media storms, board revolts, and public judgment, emerging stronger for having survived it. After dinner, Marcus stood and extended his hand. Dance with me. There's no dance music playing. There's music. That's enough. They swayed together under the string lights while Rachmaninoff built toward the triumphant finale. Elena rested her head on Marcus's chest, listening to his heartbeat, feeling completely at peace in a way she had not known was possible. When the music ended, Marcus stepped back and lowered himself to one knee. He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. A year ago, I was a man who had everything money could buy and nothing that actually mattered. I was hollow, dead inside, going through motions without purpose. And then I made a terrible mistake that cracked me open, that forced me to see someone I had been making invisible. You didn't just forgive me. You showed me what I had been missing, what I had sacrificed in my pursuit of success that meant nothing. He opened the box. Inside was a simple gold band with a small diamond, clearly old, clearly treasured. This was my mother's wedding ring, the only thing of hers I kept. She wore it every day, even after my father became someone she couldn't recognize. She believed people could change, could be better. You believe that too, and you've proven it by believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. Elena's vision blurred with tears. Elena Maria Reyes, I'm not asking you to save me. I'm not asking you to complete me. I'm asking you to partner with me, to build a life where we challenge each other, support each other, and choose each other every single day. Will you marry me? Yes, absolutely, completely, yes. Marcus slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as though Diane Thorne had somehow known decades ago that it would one day belong to the woman who would finally teach her son how to love. He stood and pulled Elena into his arms, kissing her with a combination of relief and joy and profound gratitude. I love you. I will spend the rest of my life proving I'm worthy of you. You already are. Just keep being who you've become. Keep choosing people over profit. Keep letting yourself feel instead of calculating everything. That's all I need. They stood together on the rooftop while the city spread out below them, Two people who had started in impossibly different worlds and somehow built a bridge that connected them. The journey had been messy and complicated and frequently painful. But standing there in the string lights, with Marcus's arms around her and his mother's ring on her finger, Elena understood that the difficult path was often the one that led somewhere worth going. 6 months later, they married in Valdosta, Georgia, the church where Elena's parents had exchanged vows 45 years earlier. Maria walked Elena down the aisle. Her health improved enough that by consistent medication and reduced stress that she could stand for the entire ceremony. Marcus's vows made half the congregation cry. Elena's vows made the other half cry. They promised to see each other, to honor each other's autonomy, to build something that mattered more than money. At the reception, Marcus announced the Reyes Thorne Foundation, $2 billion endowed to provide healthcare access, education support, and economic opportunity for working families. The first initiative, full medical coverage for every family in Valdosta, making under $75,000 per year. Maria cried, Mrs. Patterson cried, Elena cried, even Marcus got misty-eyed, though he denied it later. Late that night, after the guests had left and the celebration wound down, Marcus and Elena sat on the porch of Maria's house. The same porch where Elena had sat as a 16-year-old orphan, wondering how she would survive. The same porch where Maria had told her that family meant taking care of each other, no matter the pechamam. Are you happy? Marcus turned to look at his wife, a concept that still felt surreal and perfect. I didn't know what that word meant before you. Now it means this: you, me, your grandmother, snoring inside, the crickets, the knowledge that tomorrow I don't have to prove anything to anyone except you. And that's the highest standard I've ever had. You've changed so much, become someone your mother would be proud of. We both changed. You're not the scared girl who apologized for my mistake anymore. And you're not the cold billionaire who walked into her room. We saved each other. No, you saved me. I just provided the resources for you to save yourself. Elena took his hand, threading their fingers together. We saved each other. That's what love is. Not one person rescuing another, but two people choosing to be better together than they were apart. They sat in silence, watching stars appear in the Georgia sky, unobscured by the light pollution that drowned them in New York. Marcus thought about the journey that had brought him here, from that terrible night when he violated Elena's privacy to this perfect night when he got to call her his wife. The path had been harder than anything he had faced in business, but it had also been the only path worth walking. Elena thought about the girl she had been a year ago, invisible, exhausted, convinced that survival was the best she could hope for. She thought about the woman she had become, respected, competent, loved. The transformation had cost her comfort and safety and peace, but it had given her something infinitely more valuable, a life worth living rather than just enduring. As they sat together on that porch, two people who should never have crossed paths, but who could no longer imagine existing separately, both understood the same essential truth. Shame had cracked them open. But love had let the light in.